Good morning, everybody. In this new lecture, again, my name is Daniele Conficoni. I am a doctor in veterinary medicine and I have a PhD in veterinary science, and I work at the University of Padua in Italy, and I'm here today to talk to you about the creation of a scientific manuscript. Today we are going to see different features and some hints in this topic. This is an important topic for scientific research because we disseminate science with the articles, and if you are able to write a good article in English that could be understood by a wide group of people, our research could be disseminated and could be shared with the rest of the world. So, in the creation of the manuscript, now we are going to see all the features, if we are able to see it, and we are going to start with the title, then we will have the abstract, the keywords, the introduction, material and methods, the results section, discussion, conclusion, references, and the tables and figures. So the title is one of the most important part of the manuscript, because the title is the presentation of the manuscript. A good title with a good abstract, they will create the good understanding of the manuscript, and it will increase the acceptability by the journal. So the title is really important, to have a good title written in a good way and with meaningful informations. So the title must be concise, not too long, it must be informative. So what does it mean? It means that it must give the information that are inside the manuscript. It could be considered a very compressed version of the abstract. Sometimes it is also the only part that most people will read. So we must be sure to work on it very early in order to select a very good title. It is used by the databases for research information, so a good title will be enough to be selected by these databases. And it should state also something about the results rather than vagueness. The scope of the title is to respond to two questions. What is it and why do we propose it? So why my research is so good and beautiful. So the majority of people will find the paper with search engines, so if we have some keywords, it's better to put them inside the title and in the abstract. We should avoid abbreviation, and also it is important that from the title, at least, it should come out the experimental design of our work. It is better to be not too shy, but also not too over-exaggerating, but we must be sure about the data. We usually have to try to avoid rhetoric questions because they will not give information. But sometimes some witty or creative titles could be welcome, but this measure must be useful for our let's say, for our goal, that is inform about our research. In order to see if the title is good, you need to check different information. First of all, if it is in correct English. The English must be correct, with good syntax, with good vocabulary. We must to check the spelling and the capitalization of the words. Otherwise, the title will not be clear and will not be selected by the database searches. It must be understandable. So not just a string of nouns, but something that is understandable, with some adverbs and maybe some prepositions. Could be eye-catching and dynamic, with through the use of effective vocabulary and maybe some punctuation. It could be sufficiently and appropriately specific, so not too much, but also not too low, and it must reflect the content of the paper. Again, we must check the information pack of the journal to see if the title meets the requirements specified. And again, the checking is really important, because just a word processor is not enough, because we could have some false friends or also that are spelled well but they are not correct in that context, but we have to be sure that it works. So usually a title has at least one verb and one or more preposition. So it tends to be easier to understand, and also it tends to be understandable again, because if we would use just a string of nouns, we would have problems in understanding. Again, the checking with the Google Scholar is paramount, and we could prepare several different titles and then make our colleagues, our friends, to select the correct one. And the specificity about our results, we only know them, so we must see if they are meet inside the title. And also we could, as always, try to think that we are the editor, and what would we think if we would receive that title. Now let's talk about the abstract. The abstract is another very important part of the journal. It is again the presentation of the article, and a lot of people will only read the abstract. So the abstract is very important for our article, because also the abstract could be read, and then after the reading people could understand what is our research and decide to cite us or not. It should state briefly the purpose of the research, the principal results, and the major conclusions. So the primary goal of the abstract is to render the general significance and the conceptual advances of our work, but in a clear way and short. It is often presented in a separate form from the title, from the article, so it must be able to stand alone. We should not include references, and again, it is the only part that most people will read. Usually you have to avoid non-standard or uncommon abbreviations, or at least you have to define them the first time you mention them. Then it must be clearly stated the experimental design and the results. So this is important, because we must be able to understand all the article by it. It could have different lengths based on the type of journal, so usually it's between 150 and 250 words, and again, it's the best presentation of your research. Usually you could also divide it in background, methods, results, and conclusion. Some journals, they require this division, but usually you can use this division if you like. And then what are graphical abstracts? Graphical abstracts are an abstract made of only one picture. So this graphical abstract will have this all the information as a picture, as a figure. So how to understand if our abstract is good or not? I could ask me some questions. So first of all, have I followed the journal instruction to others? So I must check the type of the abstract that the journal wants. And then, Have I followed the right structure with structure or unstructured and style? So, am I okay with it? And then the questions about the content. So first of all, have I put some background, some context? Have I say the research problem, the aim, with the gap of knowledge that I plan to fill with my research? And what about the methods? Have I said something about methods and the results? And then in the end, have I covered the implication and or the conclusions of my research? Again, have I choose carefully the keywords so that the readers can locate and understand my abstract? This is paramount. And again, are the information I gave to the readers 100% clear to them, and why I gave them? So is it short enough? And again, is it the less redundant as possible? Because the shorter it is, the better if I am able to give all the information in a shorter amount of words. And then the tenses, so the verbs. Are the verbs correct? I use present simple for the established knowledge, the present perfect for past to present background information, and the past simple for my contribution, so what we did. What about keywords? Keywords are the main themes that are present in the paper. They're really important for indexing and for the research and finding of the paper. They are very useful for being more cited. Their number depends on the journal, so they are usually between 4 and 7. It's better if my keywords are the keywords that are present in the abstract and maybe in the title also. They are divided by semicolon, and then also more than one word could compose one keyword. Okay, so for example, if my research is on a very specific bacterium, I could use the genus and species name, because the people interested in that bacterium will search for that bacterium in particular. And usually they are underestimated by the authors, but they are really important. What about highlights? Some journals could require the highlights that are very quick and small and short information about the paper, and they have to convey the core finding of the article with just bullet points, between 3 to 5, with a very short amount of characters. And they are used in particular by the editor, but also in some journals they publish the highlights in order to give a better understanding of the articles to the readers. Now let's talk about the introduction. The introduction section of the article is the beginning of the article, so you must to draft it as a story. You have to narrate your story. Why you arrived from the background, from the references to your experimental design. So it is the sufficient background to evaluate the results of the research. Usually you don't have to do an extensive review of the literature, but you must give the rationale and the objectives of the study. And finally you have to state the aim of the study. Usually you should avoid the expression of the results, and it is important for the understanding of the science that is behind the decision of conducting that specific research. And again, is useful for data mining in order to understand better what was done by other authors and why they decided to do that. What is the general structure of the introduction? You start very general and then you go deeper. So you start with theme of general interest, then you identify the gap in the current knowledge, and then you identify the criteria for the study and the study system that could fill that gap. And after all these premises, you say what is your study about and your specific aim. And at the end, you state a brief overview of the conclusions, in the sense that you are going to see that with that results we will be able to do some interesting facts. How to understand if it is good or not? Is the research question clear? Have I expressed it in the correct way? And again, it must be a clear roadmap in order to understand all the paper, because later the discussion section will have a symmetry with the introduction. So I must mention what I want to use, not useless information. I must mention only what I need. And again, what the readers need, the information I put in the introduction. And I must be the shorter as possible, because it is important for me to have this good understanding, and the shorter is better. And then I have also to use in the correct way the tenses of the verb as for the abstract. So I will use present simple for the general background context with the description of what will be done in the paper, then present perfect for the past to present solutions, and then past simple, that is my contribution, so what we did again. And with this, in this case, we could also use different verbs for my contribution. That could be the present simple or also the future simple. So what we are going to do in the research. Material methods section is a very, let's say, easy section to write, because usually it's very specific of your field, and it is easy to write usually. But you must be sure to give sufficient information in order to let other researchers to repeat your experiment, because it is this is the way in which the science work. And these methods, if they are published in other article, you should refer to them. You should also indicate the reference. You have to indicate the reference. But if the source of the methods is not available for everyone or not easy to find, you must include the details, because you need the people that read, the readers, to be able to repeat the experiment. And then you have to write what you change and if you change. Again, when you report the sources, you must be sure to indicate the characteristic of these sources. So like the company, the city, the country, in order to let, again, other researchers to be able to cite and to repeat in the same condition your experiment. And evaluating this section of the article is good for understanding if the article is good or not, because it must have some logic inside and it must report all the necessary information. It must be clear but concise. So what I say must have it must be meaningful. And again, you have to report here the statistical methods applied, not just your lab stuff, but also the statistics behind it, behind your results. So what type of program in particular, and what type of statistical test you did in order to implement the statistical analysis. You could use also tables and figures if you think that with that you will be able to express in a better way what you used, and also maybe the logic behind the experiments. How to understand if it is a good, if you wrote a good material method section or not? First of all, it must be easy for the readers to follow the logic and to replicate. This is the first really important part. You must be sure to give only the methods to the readers, no background references and in chronological orders. And again, grammar is paramount, and also the tenses of the verbs. So past simple, maybe in passive form for describe what we did, and the present simple to describe some scientific fact, if we are mentioning them. Then we have the results. The results section is the section that says what was found. You could use text and tables and figures, and you must avoid the comments to the results, because they will be in the discussion. Sometimes we could have our results and the discussion section, so in that case you report the result with the comments, but if the sections are separated, you must have only the results. And again, they are the findings of your research, and you must be sure to report all the results, not only the interesting results. You must to do all, report all, and not repeat the results from tables in the text. How to understand if you wrote a good results section? You must be clear, report only key results and the trends. So I must be sure what is my meaning, what I want to give to the audience, and I have to avoid the conclusion. Again, really important. And again, I have to use the correct tenses, so past simple for the findings in the passive form, and present simple for the scientific fact again. The discussion is the comments to the results, and I have to, in particular, I have to give why the significance of the results of the work in the science, in the scientific world. So I have to give importance to the results. Usually this section is in symmetry with the introduction, so the story is the same but with the comments to the results and with the relation with the known, with what was back. It could also have inside it the conclusion, and I must mention if we have limitation and shortcomings to my interpretation. So I have to place the novelty of the discovery in the good context, so people would understand why I did it and why it is so important for the future. So how to understand if the discussion is good? Is my contribution to the knowledge gap clear? So I must be sure that my story for the research is good, but without exaggeration, because I must keep my foot on the ground, because I must not give too much over-interpretation to my results. And again, have I truly interpreted my results, or have I just repeated them? I must give comments on the results. And then, is there a good balance on what could be and what could be not? Have I really offered alternative explanations to my results? And then, have I distinguished in a clear way what is fact and speculation? Because it must be clear what I found, but what I am thinking about it. And then again, I must be sure to have no bias in my research. So I don't have to hidden the data, even if they are unexpected. I must give all the results. And then I have to include in the literature also the references that do not corroborate my findings, because it's important the relation and the discussion in this case. And then in the end, have I integrated my result with previous research in order to explain what I observed or found, and again, I don't have to introduce new findings, and I have to remove any trivial information. So in the end, symmetry with the introduction, check that I don't have mere repetition, and it must be clear again what is it and why do I propose this paper. So thank you everyone for listening, and we are over now, so I hope you enjoyed, and if you need more information, you could contact me, and see you.